Hello, I'm Jason Howard, and this is the eighth and final module of the Inclusion of Special Populations Training 703 KAR 5:070 training series. So welcome to Module 8. Module 8 will focus on what many consider as recommended practices or key points that may serve useful to test administrators and assessment staff in the reduction of assessment allegations. Now, this module does not guarantee that allegations will not occur. The intention is to produce information that might assist in strengthening testing procedures in schools and districts. Now, the slides in this training have been designed to highlight specific ways to try and reduce an allegation when administering a state assessment. Please do not think that these slides eliminate the chance for an allegation to occur, but the purpose behind them are to shine the spotlight on areas that the Office of Assessment Accountability, along with the Office of Legal Services and Allegation Investigators, might see on a regular basis. This allegation prevention and best practice tip is to always make sure students who receive an accommodation with an IEP, 504, or program service plan have access to said accommodation routinely during instruction. The plan must be current, up to date, and a very important area we often see is that when a roster is being pulled for testing purposes in Infinite Campus, it may not be pulled if that plan is not locked. For someone who does not work with a student on a day-to-day basis without seeing their name on the roster, that is a way to not provide an accommodation. That in turn could lead to an allegation. This allegation and best practice tip is to make sure when a plan changes near the time of testing that it is documented well in the conference summary and that there is evidence that supports the change. Also, anytime a change to the plan is made, especially close to the time of the test, everyone involved with testing that student needs to be made aware of those changes. It might be in the best interest to conduct a special meeting to discuss those plans before moving forward with any additional assessment practices. This allegation and best practice tip is to highlight specific training requirements and to focus on student refusal when receiving an accommodation on a state test. First, for anyone who is involved in a state assessment, they must receive the administration code training. For those providing or assisting with accommodations, they must receive the administration code and inclusion of special populations training. Many districts do require both trainings to be completed by all test administrators and parties involved with state assessments. Now, this is a local decision that may be enforced with or without the consent of KDE. Now, in Section 1, we talked about students being involved at an appropriate age to assist in their plan developments. We also discussed a student's ability to refuse the use of an accommodation at any time. Now, this is not uncommon for a student to refuse an accommodation regardless of their reason. At the point of the student making that request, the test administrator should cease providing it at that time. The accommodation should only be provided again at the request of the student. Now, make sure to document any time a student denies use of an accommodation and if or when they request the use of that accommodation as the test moves forward. Now let's look at some ways to prevent allegations or best practices to engage in when providing a reader. So the first one is a reader should never guide or direct the student to a correct response. When reading to a student, the test administrator should never change a test item or answer options, even at the student's request. Secondly, a reread may only be provided at the request of the student. The only time the test administrator is permitted to reread something without a student request is for the alternate assessment. Now let's look at some ways to prevent allegations or best practices to engage in when providing a scribe accommodation. So a scribe should only provide the exact information that a student provides. So all answers must be directed and guided by the student at all times. Secondly, a scribe should only provide the writing support to a student when they have additional accommodations permitted on the test. For example, the scribe could not read a response back to the student unless that student had a reader on their plan as well. Now let's look at some ways to prevent allegations or best practices to engage in when providing oral native language support. So first, flexibility to test schedule on a state assessment is not permitted unless a student has oral native and language support marked on their PSP. Now, if there is a shortage of interpreters, which does happen year to year, EL students shall use a different test administration schedule than the regular student population. The altered schedule must occur within the district established testing window. Next, paraphrasing or simplified language are for directions only and cannot be provided on any part of the test and no longer part of this regulation. Now, this concludes Module 8 of this training series. In this module, we looked at allegation prevention and best practices. While the tips in this module do not guarantee an allegation will not occur, following them will certainly lessen the chances of an allegation occurring. Remember to always ask a question if you are unsure before providing accommodation to a student. If you have any questions about anything we discussed, please feel free to contact our office by emailing dacinfo@education.ky.gov or by calling 502-564-4394. Thank you for your time and attention.